good morning. Welcome to Business Brew. We'll welcome in our LinkedIn audience. We do live stream this on LinkedIn. My name's Josh. I own and operate Tinderbox Marketing, and I started this event. I just got asked by one of our previous guests. He said, "You've only been doing this since like 2020," and I had to go look. I think we've been doing this since 2017. So it's been a while. We've been doing it a long time, and I really appreciate the ability to be able to do this. It's a lot of fun. So before we dig in, I have a couple people I have to thank. So first off is Nathan Slaybaugh with Slab Visuals. They help us with all the video, they record it, he live streams it, and make sure that people can watch this after the fact. So like round of applause for Nathan. Brew Peddler brought us coffee, and they just opened up a new location, or their first location, up on the South Hill. It's on 29th where the Ross is and the Super One Foods is, so it's kind of right in there. Manitou Tap House, if you're not sure, that's where it's at. So big thanks to them for the coffee. And then also Startup Spokane, what was their name again? Brew Peddler, yeah. And then Startup Spokane is our partner with the library so that we're able to get access to spaces like this at the Hive. So we'll do a round of applause for Brew Peddler and Startup Spokane. I want to turn it over to you. So I'll let you, Kitara, introduce yourself. I want to hear a little bit about what you do like professionally, and all the things that includes, and then we'll jump right into the magazine. And I just want you to tell us everything there is about it, and then maybe I'll sneak in a question, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, my name is Kitara Johnson Jones, and just the name Kitara Sadawi means sword proud. It's a Swahili name. And my mother, I thought I was going to be a prize fighter. I did. And because I mean, a sword, and you know, it's proud. And my mother, she has her own ministry. And one day she calls me, she said, "No, not like that. I was thinking like the word of God, like boldly speaking." And so I was like, no wonder it was like something like came alive in me. And I was like, okay, I'll take that. And so I started speaking at different locations, and I ended up trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that can be hard when you have like a lot of talents, and so I was like, am I gonna be a singer? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I got involved in student government, and I was like, no, I don't think I want to do that. Then I did a little bit with veterans, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And then I became the multicultural director, one of the first in the region, and I just really excelled at that because when I look at diversity, I don't see diversity as underrepresented populations. I see diversity as every single person. And then when I started looking deeper into it, because I've served in the military, I've been overseas in Germany, I've been all these places, and I noticed something that everyone has in common. Every single person needs psychological safety. They need mattering, that they bring value and add value. They need belonging, wellness, as in the 8 dimensions of wellness, and they need fairness. Every single person. And so I'm like, wow, we focus so much on our differences, we don't really get a chance to really relate to each other. And when I started looking at protected classes, I found out that the law says you can't discriminate on the basis of race. It didn't say what race. That means every single person is a protected class. And so I learned this over time, but when I was younger, I only focused on the injustice, growing up in the inner city of Chicago, being stabbed, my artery severed, my hand broken with a bat by nail, street gang members, 620 freshmen, only 114 graduated, 40 textbooks, and 620 freshmen, so we didn't get a chance to take books home. And I'm like, this is in America. And so it just kind of jaded some of my views of how we all live in the United States and who was in the area of human concern and who wasn't. But I'm glad that the military gave me an opportunity to see the world, see Germany, come back to the United States, be in different states and see that poverty is universal. And I was like, what do I do with that? And so after I left the college, they gave me an opportunity to be the multicultural director, and I excelled in that area. And I was like, I'm not sure if I want to stay in higher ed. And then I served veterans because I'm a 90% disabled veteran. And I noticed that the accessibility piece, when we talk about diversity, is also left out, especially those who have disabilities that are not visual. And so I was figuring out, and being a person who came from the inner city, who was forced to join the gang, to go through all of that, I had a little bit of arrested development. I felt more comfortable with teens. And so I started a nonprofit, at-risk youth at Northtown Mall, ended up serving like 300 teens a month. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I would speak at all these schools. And later on, I found out the best place for me was Excelsior Wellness. It used to be Excelsior Youth Center. And so they served a lot of children, youth, and adolescents that had, trauma, that they were trying to get them to a place of healing, who's had parents sometimes that had left them, abandoned them, those that were aging out of foster care. And I was like, this is my place. And I had been on this trajectory. I want to do this. I want to be a national speaker. I want to be, a trainer, because I was a teacher, a trainer by trade. And so I started there. I became a peer support, certified peer. And I'm able to be a middle manager as well as talk to the youth there and make a difference. So every day I would see the purpose. And so I started there at that role as a peer support supervisor. Then I became the director of outpatient services, and then I became the vice president of education services. No, it was HR training director, then the vice president of education services, then the chief development officer, then the chief diversity officer. And now I'm the chief people officer. I oversee HR, marketing, public relations, and I do that and a lot of strategy work. So for the organization, and do a lot of outreach and engagement in the community. And so that's my day job. I do that, and work in Excelsior is now like a coordinated care organization. We have multiple locations, co-locations, new buildings. So it feels good with, and people tried to take me out of there, but I just can't. It's the purpose, and it's the work we do every day. So, which brings me to what I do today as a side hustle. But I won't even say a side hustle. I'll say it's a passion with purpose. I have trained for the military, groups out of 826 at the Pentagon, Texas, you name it, across the country. Been speakers at all military installations via virtually. And so talking about this thing called inclusion. And people would talk about diversity, and people look at me like, how do you say things a little bit different than everybody else? But I believe that there's a different way. We often talk about generational trauma, so I was like, why don't we also talk about generational resilience? And it's not to be Pollyanna, but it's to look at the world in a way of a strength-based language, so that we can be able to extend the resilience to forgive others when they make a mistake or they say something incorrectly. So who is it? How do we cancel each other in a community? And then I came up with this idea one day. I was honestly like in purposeful thought, meditation, and prayer, and I came up with come unity. And as a declaration, come unity. And then I said, well, because stories like mine and a narrative like mine was not being put into media. It was always the oppression or people that were just angry about it. And I understand that hurt people, and heal people. And I don't expect you to have a dissertation in my culture. But the best way that you can learn from me and I can learn from you if we have a conversation. And I think that the art of listening is a lost art. Being able to truly hear what somebody has to say. And my name is Kitara, is the name of an ancient African kingdom. And what I love about Kitara is when we think about like African griots, those are storytellers. These are people who could sing, they could dance, they had the unique ability to tell a story. And when you listen to these stories, it was almost as if you were watching television. I believe that that is in my DNA. I believe that I'm a modern day griot. But I'm not just telling the story of African history. I'm telling the story that each and every one of us can come to a place where it's not just a safe space, but a shared space, which means that you don't have to change your belief. It could be completely opposite of mine, but I believe that that has value, and this person has value. But when we come together, we have to be in a, what does it look like to share space? So you can have your own personal beliefs at home, but when we work together or we're in a community property, we agree to be judgment-free, solution-focused, handle conflicts with civility, trust that each other's intentions are good. Nobody came from wherever they came from to intentionally insult me. And somebody told me one day, they said, Kitara, you can't force people to say that people have good intentions. And I was thinking, well, what is the equitable way to measure good intent? So I make a conscious decision to choose that the person next to me has positive intent. I went to an event one day and this 70-year-old woman says to me, I'm so glad colored people are showing up. Now the inside was like, what'd you say? However, I looked at her name, her age, like visibly, and I was like, okay. And I said, Kitara, do you think she came over here to welcome you, or she really wanted to insult you? What was the name that she knows related to your race? And we could say, oh, people should know, read the news, read on the web. But everybody's not on the web. And if I'm going to be inclusive, I need to be truly inclusive, and I had to listen for understanding. And when I communicate, I need to communicate with comprehension in mind, because one, we have people with varying literacy levels, but we still put out words that are way higher than the grade of 5th or 6th grade. When we think about being inclusive, when we think about language, are we looking at the fact that when we speak or we send emails as an owner of a business, as a person inside of a company, are we sending them at night? What is the power differential over the people that we're talking to? If a person that I know, I'm emailing them and they think that they have to respond to me every hour at any hour just because I needed to get it off my desk, I look at all of that and I said, well, how can I communicate and have my story told in a way that matters? And so I didn't see it in the newspaper. I didn't see it in any publication that I was looking for. So I said, you know, I'm gonna start something different. I'm gonna start Come Unity Solutions magazine. And I was like, my husband at the time, he was like, what are you doing? You're doing what? And I was like, I have to start this magazine. I need to get people from different backgrounds, people who don't see eye to eye, and put them in the same publication, or find ways to unify people on subjects that they didn't know that they would agree on. And so my husband was like, how are you gonna do that? So the first magazine I did was around MLK Day. That was the launch. And it was around beloved community, because who doesn't want to have beloved community? So I got leaders, I had people who were formerly incarcerated, I had QR codes in it for those who might not be able, who need to watch it online, you know, those audiovisual learners. I did all of that, and I was like, my son does videography, and then my husband is a photographer by trade. My other son is in the UFC. So I was like, hey, can you put this out there for me? And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And so it just kind of, I knew a lot of people because I became a national speaker and trainer on inclusion. And having a background in organizational change management and HR, I was able to really talk to systems and show them how they could use practical steps in order to keep their people together and still recognize those differences. And so they were like, we really like it. And it had results in all different types of industries. So I was like, maybe I'm onto something here. So I started the magazine, and that one went really well. It was super shiny. People just kept talking about the quality of the paper, the quality of the magazine. And I'm a person, when I see words, I have to have colors in them, or I can't read it well. So apparently there's something in the brain that causes that. I'm not quite sure what it is, because I don't have time to research it like that, but somebody told me, and I'll remember it one day. So I create this magazine, and so I said, well, that was supposed to be the special edition. That's why I had that level of paper. And then I was getting ready to do the first publication, you know, and I was like, well, let me give myself some time, because I do have a full-time job in the C-suite, you know, how am I gonna build this out? And so my husband was like, you're not putting any advertisements in it? I said, well, I'll put the chart in there for a fee. And I was like, I feel in my heart that I'm not supposed to accept advertisements until the end of the year. And he was like, what? Because what kind of business model is that? You know, you're not going to get any advertisements. I said, I want the message to be pure. And I don't want it to be bought or sold. And I want to make sure that I'm doing this from the right reasons in the right place in my heart. Because when you have a passion and a purpose, profits will follow. They will. I believe that with all my heart. And so I said, okay, we're doing this. And I put it out there, and I put the rates in there for my husband, really, because he's like, you got me out here running around the city taking these photos for free. I'm like, you're gonna be in a magazine. So then June came, and I'm gonna do this launch, and now I realize that it is, Juneteenth is coming up. It's also Pride Month. And I'm like, what can I talk about? And people are so divided on each. And so first I was like, I'm gonna do a magazine about proud families. And I wanna get all the different types of families, however they're made, whatever they look like, and have them define to themselves what family looks like. And so I went to a friend of mine, her and her wife, and I was like, are you willing to be in this? And she says, it's not always safe for families like mine to come out. And it broke my heart. That this wonderful family that loved each other could not be featured in the magazine, but out of fear. And I was like, nobody should feel that way. It shouldn't hurt to be a citizen in Spokane or anywhere in the world. And so I was like, what can I do? So I had to abandon that idea because I thought about the safety of those in our community. And so I was like, what else can I do? And I was like, Juneteenth. And I heard people like, Juneteenth, the holiday for Black people, when all Black people were finally free. And then I was thinking, I was like, well, yes. And I saw people upset about Juneteenth on some, and I'm like, what are you upset about Juneteenth? Shouldn't we all be celebrating that all Americans are free? I thought that would be a holiday for everyone. And I said, I saw people, should it be a holiday? Should it not be? Abraham Lincoln's name. You can imagine the web. All these things are popping up, right? And so I'm like, okay. And I was like, what if I centered people on a common theme around Juneteenth? What if Black people, when Juneteenth arrived, when we needed the Union Army to come in with General Granger and set the last of the 250,000 African slaves free? When Harriet Tubman was one of the only civilians to lead a military raid to free 700 slaves. A lot of people don't know that. I was like, what if back then, when the last of the slaves were free, white people and Black people couldn't come together and celebrate? What if Juneteenth today, why are we still following the past when we couldn't celebrate together? It wasn't that Black people didn't want to celebrate with white people, but they couldn't back then, so why not Juneteenth be for everyone? The founder of Juneteenth actually created a flag that was red, white, and blue to connect with the United States, not to be separate. So when you see the red, black, and green, that was a flag because Black Americans were not accepted, so we had our own flag. Does that make sense? So we had to make a space for ourselves. But the Juneteenth founder changed it to red, white, and blue for a particular purpose around unity. And that freedom didn't come just from one race of people. It came from all of us working together, the Underground Railroad. And so I thought, in honor of the military, both sides, wherever you come from, we can recognize and respect those who serve inside of the armed forces. So I highlighted people in our community, and Lieutenant Colonel Abigail Curtis, who ran the second largest maintenance squadron on base. And then I got other veterans of all different races and backgrounds to share their story, because at the end of the day, it is our stories that we remember. It is the stories that touch people's heart in order to change their mind. And so that was that one. And then I was like, what can we all agree on with education? So I had some things come that, because it's a side, I won't say it's a passion with a purpose. So I was like, how am I going to get the education edition out? And so I was like, I got to do it on this. And I'm asking people for opportunities. I'm like, where am I going to put this magazine? You know, how am I going to get it out? But I believe that when we have a passion, you attract what you put out. So I start finding like-minded people who love community. And that's when I met the owner of Indaba, Bobby, and his wife, and they started this local business and how they wanted to be in the communities where people are, whether they're unhoused, regardless of the income, a place where Indaba even means important gathering. And I said, he understands community. And so I let him see that magazine, and he was like, you can have them in my coffee shops. He happened to have 5, who knew? So that became the first place. And then somebody said, Kitara, I love this idea. I want to introduce you to somebody at the Inlander that I know. And so they happen to be really high up in the Inlander part. And they were they're a family business that started with the Inlander. And so it's the largest independently owned paper. A lot of people don't know that. And so I went to the owner and I said, hey, what do I do? So I was talking about, they were telling me about distribution. I said, I don't know anything about that. I know that I have stories. I want accurate narratives of people in our community that don't always have a voice. I want a place to share their stories and people who are doing good things. And I remember talking to one of the people. She said, well, I've been a journalist. She was the spouse of, I think, one of the owners. She was like, but journalists have an obligation to tell the truth and raise awareness. I said, I agree. And I also agree that journalists have an obligation not to keep people in a perpetual state of fear. And I was like, just as we put people who are doing negative things out, we can acknowledge people who are doing great things. The solutions, their version of the solutions to the complex problems in our community. And we talked, and we had a great conversation. And so I kept messaging her. I wouldn't let her in, I just kept messaging her. And I was like, I just need to know how. What is this distribution thing? She said, okay, I'm gonna send you some things that you can read. So then one of the owners emails me and say, hey, this is about persistence, never give up. And so he sends me this message, he told me something, and I wrote back. I said, I hear what you're saying. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm not asking for money. I'm not even asking for sponsorship. I'm asking for a chance. Well, you can find this on the Inlander Community Stands, the magazine, and I appreciate him telling me what to do to give me a chance. And I think sometimes we have to be persistent when we're trying to start something, and it doesn't matter if everybody is not on board with you in the beginning, because you'll find your people, you'll find your niche. And I found that with people who are looking for a different story, a way that we can come together, because we can't fight indefinitely, we get tired at some point. So a lot of people, I learned that the road of a peacemaker is different. The pathway of a peacemaker is different than the road of a fighter. And I had been a fighter like all my life. And so I was like, what other way besides these 7 strategic grocery stores, because people go there, and I think they were surprised people started coming to me and they was like, Kitara, where are the ads? They say, I read your magazine front to back in 45 minutes. I was like, awesome. And it was like, people was like, well, what's wrong with this? And I was like, what do you mean? There's no ads in it. The same thing happens online. And then I started looking at other publications, and there's ads all over the place, that to the point where we're not even really getting the story, because we've got this, oh yeah. And I actually have been diagnosed with ADHD, so I am easily distracted at times without my medication. So if you meet me at 4:30, it's not and say, remember me? I'm gonna say, hey girl, or hey. I don't remember. However, I meet thousands of people when you share your story. And so I was like, how am I gonna do this? And so I was like, it's finding your people. It's finding your community. Because there are people, when we think about cassette tapes went out a long time ago, but somebody thought it'd be cool and nostalgic to bring it back. At one point, somebody brought back record players, and I was like, what? But there's something for everybody, and I think millennials changed the game with the workplace, and they changed the game when it comes to business, because they weren't bound by these norms of I have to be in this organization for 20 to 30 years. They weren't bound by that. They was like, I'm gonna start my own thing. And then they got the microphone and the internet and was like, you know what, you don't have to produce my song. Look at Macklemore in Washington State. He made his own music. He didn't find it, but he ends up going viral and people finding out his music, not because somebody found him, he did it his way. And I was like, maybe I need to do the downtown. No. So I was like, how am I gonna do this? And so I start one person at a time is how you change the world, right? So this fall, I came up with another one, and I was talking about this earlier, but again, I told you I had ADHD, so sometimes I talk in a star. So the magazine, normally my magazine comes out within a week. You get thousands of copies, take time to print, and then they have to ship it here, so I have to get the timing right. So I'm like, I need this in September. Well, I was like, well, I'll do it the last week of September. And then it was the next week, first week of October. Then it was the third week, and it was like, this is wrong. Ma'am, you have page 9, 13, and then 11. I'm like, what? So I had to take it back. Well, next thing I know, it is November, right? And I'm like, and my husband said, I was like, Tony, it's been 4 weeks. And he says, it's your magazine, you can put it out whenever you want. And I was like, that's true. Well, I didn't even try to do this. I just ended up meeting people in our community. I was helping the Idaho Coeur d'Alene schools with students being called the N-word and students using the cell phone to make whipping sounds. And I love that their school district is passionate about taking care of their students. And so when I look at it, it's like, I'm sad, but it happened to my daughter in Meade School District. And I was like, this is a purpose, this is your purpose, Kitara, you go out there. And so they brought in a community to talk about how to take care of students, and I'm out there and I meet the chairman of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And we're talking, and I'm telling him what my strategy is and that what will work. And so he was like, so I gave him a magazine. And he was like, this is great. You need help with this? And I'm like, I kind of said I'm not taking ads until the end of the year, so I need to stick with that. And so I said, well, can I interview you for my next magazine? And I wasn't thinking about it is going to be late. And then I called David Brown Eagle, who has served in the military, and it was originally for the first edition that we were honoring veterans and heroes and things like that. And so he talked about education. And so I asked him, I said, how do you define education? And he said, knowledge gathering and knowledge sharing. And even though this magazine was late, who knew Native American is November is Native American Heritage Month. So I guess it was right on time. And so being able to share stories of people who have done so much in our community, like Stephanie Nobles Beans, 27 years at Whitworth, you know, different people have done so much in our community. How do I give back to them and make sure they have an accurate legacy? Well, there's a niche, holding something tangible, being able to look at people in our community who are making a difference. So when we want to be a bridge and you have a great idea, you can reach out to the person that you see in this because they're local. And then other volunteers came on board. Like Erin, who served 26 years in the Coast Guard. She was like, I want to help, I'll edit. And I'm like, girl, I ain't got no money for you yet. And so recently I was at an event and I met the CEO of a local credit union, and she said, I love this. I brought it to my marketing team. Let's talk about how we can support this. And then the next thing I know, another business owner said, you know, Kitara, I see what you're doing. I want to donate to your magazine. And I'm like trying to hold it together because if you all don't notice or not, it's almost the end of the year. And then the NAACP called me and said, hey, we're doing our annual Freedom Fund banquet. And we were wondering if Community Solutions Magazine would do our program and add stories in it. And so I went to put the Black National Anthem in it, and I said, let me put some education around this, because I could feel that there would be some tension around a Black National Anthem, and people might not understand why. So one of the articles in it is about, the actual song is called Lift Every Voice and Sing. But when the NAACP started, African Americans were not, we didn't really have a place. So Lift Every Voice and Sing was actually written for Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And so when the NAACP heard it, it was a children's choir that sang it. They adopted it as their anthem, and it became the Black National Anthem, known as that. So I wanted to provide education around that. And so tomorrow, there will be 450 people. They completely sold out. And this is the program. Hill Harper is the keynote speaker, the actor from CSI New York, which I'm going to have him sign this magazine. And 450 people will have community in their hand tomorrow. And then another organization said, hey, we're doing this. Can Community Solutions Magazine be the program for that? Because we're adding education. So I think this is better than any marketing that I could have ever done on my own. And I think that there are going to be more and more people who come on board, because this, when we start taking ads in January, they will be in the back. It's still in a book, because a lot of people start magazines from the back. So I don't think that magazines print is going to go away. I think there's a niche for everyone, but I think it's something about holding something in your hand that can be put on the shelf, that can be given to a parent, a grandparent, family member, something that you can go back to without ting, 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 without somebody telling you to subscribe. And right now, I put this out for free. I don't know, people are like, what are you doing? Creating the audience and finding my tribe. Who are my people who want to learn about other people? Because I often see the same people in publications all the time. And I'm like, I'm celebrate, I'm not a hater, you know? Celebrate those individuals, but there's other people that are doing great things too. And this last one, I've got CEOs, got a high level, like a PhD folks, but I also believe that Jeremiah, who's in here, who did 20-something years in prison, had a life sentence since he was 14 years old, just graduated from Gonzaga's law school, and is free now, and he is working downtown at the courthouse. That's a person we should know. What happened in his life that led him to the place that he had a life sentence at 14? And should we be sentencing people to life at 14? But I'm glad that I was able to tell his story in that publication alongside the high-level leaders in the military, because I believe that we all have a unique value that we bring, and we can find out simply by asking what Joe told me once, asking, let's talk. I've used that, let's talk, tell me your story. Because you might not agree with me politically, but if you hear my heart, you're thinking about my story, and it can change your mind.
You were so worried about me asking questions and not sending them ahead of time. I knew this is what you were gonna do. I was like, I'll just get her going and you'll just talk. And I have like 15 nuggets of things that came out of there. And I don't even know that I have a single question, but I wanna talk a little bit, you've kind of hovered around this, and I also have ADHD, so I love that you said I talk in a star. I've never heard that. That's actually very accurate. But there's so many options now for launching a thing, and I think most people, the default setting now is a podcast, right? I want to do this thing, I have this great idea, I want to do stories, and podcast is the first thing, right? Or what we're doing here, like a live talk and we live stream it. Or there's so many options in a digital world. I really find it fascinating that you were committed to doing a magazine, and I want to hear more about that. Like, you went from knowing, it sounds like not a lot about a magazine, to knowing everything. And you said something, you said, be bold and persistent. Just dig into that more, because I think that for like a business group, that's a really good takeaway.
Well, I'd say bold and persistent. You're gonna be afraid, especially when you're investing your money in something that you believe in. And you're like, how do I get this message out there? And sometimes the best way to get the message out there is telling your story. You know, I carry this magazine with me everywhere I go because I'm telling somebody about it. That's how much I believe in it. And I believe that you have to continually express the belief in your dream. You have to know that it's gonna cost more money than you have, and it's gonna take longer than you expect. And when we know that, it gives us that mind frame to not give up. See, because I'm not worried about failing with this, because I know what I'm putting out. I believe the Creator called me to do this. And so I'm gonna do it. And what I put out in the atmosphere is not, oh, this is not gonna make it good. I'm like, my magazine is about to be X, Y, and Z. And I was like, no, it's not my magazine. This is the community's magazine. This is where we're going to tell stories. This is where we're going to highlight people. This is where we're going to focus on inclusion. I believe in inclusion with everything that I have in its broadest sense. What does that mean? Even people I don't agree with. So I try to do 2 covers. And I try to do people who are opposite in beliefs of each other. So my first one was Philip Tyler and Jennifer Mesa. So Jennifer Mesa's like, ah, and he's like, huh. And I remember when she came to me, she said, you have me in the magazine on the cover with people I wouldn't even, she said, I wouldn't even listen to their story, let alone, you know, the magazine. She said, but we were all in it, so I just read what everybody had to say. Because I was going to stop because it costs way more to print 2 different covers, just saying. So I was like, well, you know, I got to keep it going. And so, yeah, so this time I've got David Brown Eagle and Angela Jones, who's at the Gates Foundation, who is making way for education and make it accessible to all students in Washington State and pushing STEM and for all genders. And so I've highlighted her as well, and so I've got some good people in there, and our community has really good people. So whenever you watch a story, hear something about something terrible had to happen, trust me, right beside them is somebody who's doing something great. And if you dig into the story of that person, we'll know why they act or behave the way that they do. And it gives me compassion for people, and I think that's something that came in my heart is compassion. But when I say be bold, even if people don't agree with you, they don't like you, and you are on the web, you find your people. And I would say that is what the internet has done. It has shown us, it's made the world flat, that you can reach anyone in the world, but it also has put us so far out that we forgot that we have neighbors that live right next to us, that we have amazing people right in our city, and that the people that, whether you're in class or you're in business, that walk through your doors every day, every person has a story. And it's up to us to hear it. And that's how you find your people. What are they looking for? And I saw in the demographics on social media, I appealed to women between the ages of 29 and 56. So I was like, oh, okay. And so, of course, it's a coffee magazine then, because you're talking, and it's pretty. That's the other thing. It is so shiny. Everybody said the quality. The superintendent of the school district said, I would love to have your magazines. They allowed my magazines to be in the schools. So it's happening, and it's getting out there, and I believe at the right time, the right people will find it. And that's what I mean by being bold, is not being afraid to continue to share, continually express belief in your dream, in your business, because you're gonna find people to say, oh, I agree, how can I help? We forgot that we can help each other.
I think a lot of times too, as a business owner, and I'm guilty of this, especially early on, we have a tendency to feel like all we talk about is our business and all we talk about is what we're doing, so we kind of stop and we stop telling people about it. For like the first 3 years I owned my business, I don't think my mom knew what I did. And I'm pretty sure she thought I was like laundering money for the mob or something. And that's a mistake on my part, because it's assuming that my mom doesn't know people who she can introduce to me or send my way. And you're doing it because you're just so passionate about it. But the argument I would make is that every business owner, everybody in business is passionate about what they're doing, especially if they started it. And you shouldn't be shy about that passion, that you should be brave, you should share it, because you keep saying this, but you don't know who's gonna reach out and say, I wanna help. You're what I've been looking for. I need somebody like you. I wanna send people your way, right? And I think that's a huge takeaway, especially for this group.
I was at the Davenport Hotel at a conference this summer, and I brought down the first 2 magazines. It was the Washington Economic Development thing, and I'm down there. It's Juneteenth weekend, and it just so happens that the theme was Juneteenth. And so I go down there and I have this magazine, and I was about to walk out and I saw this new store that's opening up in the Davenport, right? So I'm like, oh. So I go in there, still, but they have boxes everywhere. And I said, hi, my name is Kitara Johnson, and I had started this magazine and I wanted to make sure you had a copy. And the lady looked at it, so I didn't think of it, and she was like, thank you for giving this to me. I said, tell me about your business. So she did. I told her about my purpose for the magazine. So I leave, and she comes out like an hour or 2 later, and she said, hey, I just read your magazine. She said, I want to be a part of it. How can I help in any way? And so I'm like, and she said, tomorrow I'll be presenting at the main stage at 10 o'clock, but when I'm done with that, let's talk. So I'm like, psh, you never know who will be there to support you if you don't give them a chance. But you got to tell them first.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something else I want to ask you about. First off, I feel like you really missed your calling in marketing. I don't know if you've ever done it, but you've said so many things that are just spot on. You talked about being inclusive also means language and communication. And the example you gave, I think, was like the boss emailing late at night, and it creates that idea or expectation that I have to respond. But I think it also goes deeper, that if we're trying to communicate our business in marketing or whatever, we really need to be mindful, is our language or is our communication style inclusive? Can you talk more about just that idea and maybe how we can start being more aware of that and how we can do it as business owners and marketers?
Well, the way I look at it is I realized I had to communicate everything in 3 different ways. And when we talk about side hustle, you ever did anything at your day job and was like, well, if I could do that for them, I could do it for myself? So I was like at work and I was like, we need a magazine so we can get the message out and teach people about wellness. So I make this magazine for my job and I was like, wait a minute, I could make this for myself. And so I did. And I was like, well, not just myself, but the community and this message, that I believe in about unity. It doesn't mean uniformity. And I mean, we all have a right to our own opinions, and I would like to hear them, because something you may have, I may not agree with all of it, but I think some of it I might. And when I communicate with comprehension in mind, even at my day job, I send an email for those on the formal register who like to read, but I keep it oftentimes short. But I also add context. I put links inside of my email so people can know what I'm talking about, especially if I'm introducing a word that might not be common. Do video. When I first did the first one, I had a QR code in it. The only reason why the next one didn't have it, because I ran out of time, and my son, we all were working at the same time. But I believe that the right people are going to come on board. Now that we have a little bit more, we can get more folks to come on board to be a part of this, because you get your name out there too. And so we did a QR code, we did the video. So if you go on the website for the magazine, you'll find that you'll find videos from the first interviews, because I wanted people to get the essence of it. If they had any troubles with reading, or they could get the transcript and translate it into different language. Also graphics, if you have text, also make sure there's white space. And as I told you all about me, things don't have color in it, it's hard for me to read them. And it's particular fonts that are better for people with ADHD that I didn't find out until for reading retention. So when you start thinking about your audience and who you're communicating to, make sure that you're using a language that is common, and finding a way to break it down so that people who are not in your industry can understand it. Because oftentimes we're in a specific industry, we have acronyms I call alphabet soup, and people will use them so common, and everybody's like, and nobody's gonna ask you, what does that stand for? They just do this. Oh, great, yeah. So that's what I think. Communicate everything in 3 different ways. And so this is available online, but the real gem is the one that is in print, because you can hold it, you can feel it, super shiny. And who doesn't want their picture on super shiny paper? Just say. It just looks better that way. And also giving other people opportunities. Sometimes we think it's about us, but my husband is a photographer, and he took a great shot of David. I love it. However, I also ask other photographers, to take photos as well, pay them, to just give them an opportunity too. And the more people you give opportunity, those are more people who share. Such and such gave him, my photography isn't here. So you got this business growing by word of mouth, and I don't care what anybody says, word of mouth is still the best advertising. Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to kind of piggytail that. You said another thing, again, you missed your calling in marketing. Stories are what we remember. And I think as business owners, again, we kind of struggle with the idea of telling our story or telling a story at all. So can you walk me through how you came to that? And I know it's probably part of your professional journey, like learning that, but just talk more about how stories, why they're what we remember, why they're so important.
Because products can be bought anywhere, right? We think about how Apple describes their products. Words matter how we use them. Words can turn people completely off. Saying people of color and colored people are 2 different things. Just as simple, when I thought about words, when we use words like, just for example, and I shared this before, grill. Grill could be the front of a pickup truck. Grill can be the thing you cook on. Grill can be an interrogation, asking people numerous questions. Grill could be the orthodontic appliance with jewelry in your mouth. Grill can be, somebody now told me that grill can be a mask. It's a slang term for a mask. I'm like, what? Who's wearing masks outside of Halloween? But anyway, so grill can have multiple meanings, and that is a simple word in the English language. So we have to be aware of how we use language to describe things. We know how we want to hear about stuff. Like if you just said, coffee is in the corner. Or you say, I know how it feels when you go to a place and you need that coffee to just get you jump started in the morning. Well, when you come to Business Brew and you look over to the right, you will always find the most delicious coffee that is in the community. These are local grown people. So you want to support local businesses, come and get coffee at Business Brew. Do you just want coffee in the corner? Do you want Business Brew coffee?
You have me reevaluating everything I do with this event, and I thought I was pretty good at this, and now I realize I'm not at all. So thank you for that.
But did you just catch that? I told a story about the coffee that you could relate to. Mm-hmm. And that's what storytelling does. It builds relationships. And it goes two ways. You may lose the person because they're not interested in having a relationship with you, or you might gain people. And when you tell a story really well, other people will tell that story too. But I think the biggest problem that people make is in business is that they tell too much at one time. Mm-hmm. What is your 60-second story about your business? Because if people are used to being online, can you imagine it? Nobody thinks that 3 minutes is a long time when you're getting ready, but it is when you're online. And then I don't know what it is whenever people start a video, like I was trying to do social media, but it's almost like being a social worker on social media. You literally have to be there all the time. And so I was like, I'm gonna get on TikTok, and my daughter was like, oh no. She's 12, I was like, what? She said, don't do the millennial pause. I was like, what's that? She was like, hi, I'm Kitara Johnson. I was just like so hard. And so I don't do the millennial pause. And I realized that when we put information out, we do it with a purpose. Mm-hmm. If you don't have anything to say, just don't. It's okay to be purposeful in your communication and keeping it simple, but also telling a story. I'm not 9 times out of 10 not gonna go to a business because it just has like a cool brand. I'm going to a business because I saw something online about the owner. I heard a story. Have you ever like saw an actor, they might have been attractive, but then you go look in a magazine and you see the story behind them, or some video on social media about how they give back, and you're like, oh, I love that person. And then you tell the person, did you know Keanu Reeves was in foster care and he this, that, and the other? You didn't remember his acting name. You don't remember all the movies that he played in. Some. But you're telling his story. That's what you're telling. You're not telling about him, the actor. You're telling the story.
That's awesome. Can we take some questions from the group? We have like 8 minutes left. There is a microphone. If you want to ask a question, you do have to use the microphone. But does anybody have a question for Kitara that would be, good? It doesn't have to be good. It could be any question. Come on, somebody's got something. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I have a business-related question.
That's fine.
But I am from a country, the population is no bigger than Seattle. So diversity and inclusion is very new to me. I came to America 3 years ago, and first occurrence of diversity was for like college applications, because they care a lot about inclusion and diverse body. I didn't really understand why. So I came to campus. There is a lot of promotion for diversity, for clubs, for student clubs, and the university, the workforces we go to, always talking about diverse people, diverse people. It's so important for us to have those people. But I'm not really sure why that is so much importance to people. Because I can look up definitions on Google, and it says diverse people brings new perspectives, or like it makes us more inclusive. It's like there's so many points, but I always have trouble finding the exact definition that I can really understand on diversity.
Well, I think diversity is already there in any organization. So, and I think that companies need to start being specific when they talk about the type of diversity they want or they're looking for. Because everybody in the room, even if it was the most homogeneous room, even if everybody in the company was white, they all have different perspectives, depending on where they come from. But when we talk about diversity and we're talking about racial and ethnic diversity, or talking about gender diversity, or talking about neurodiversity, we need to be specific because white employees feel like they're not a part of it if they're not mentioned in it. That makes sense. So we need to increase diversity. And the whole room is like, we don't all think the same. So I think we need to focus on inclusion, and that's building psychological safety for everyone. And then you could focus on your inclusive practices for everyone. And then you could start looking at types of diversity you would like to increase, if that makes sense. It's not gonna work any other way, because then we're gonna bring in a person of color, or we're gonna bring in this. Well, if you're not listening to your people who are not people of color, then you're not gonna do it when somebody new comes in, especially if they have a difference in opinion, because that's most likely going to happen, because that's what diversity brings. Research shows that when you increase diversity, the different types of people, you also increase conflict. So we need to be talking about conflict resolution. Team building is what we really need to be focusing on. And what I care about is belonging. And if companies start focusing on employee experience and engagement, student experience and engagement, that's when you ask the people on your team, what is it that you need? That's when you get to know them. And so people try to worry about the perfect words to say so they don't get canceled. But the truth is, when you build relationships with your people, you'll know how they want to identify. You'll be able to call them, how they address them the way they want to be addressed. And that's why I don't focus on specific language. I focus on relationships. Because at the end of the day, people are not a strategy that's on paper. These are real people with real lives, real feelings and emotions. And that's when you ask them simple questions like, how can I support you? Goes a whole long way. But people are building all these $1 million initiatives and people are still feeling isolated. The Surgeon General said that the newest epidemic is loneliness. So you can be in the same room, but it doesn't mean that you're working on the same team. You could be in the same room, doesn't mean that people are talking to you and you're feeling engaged, because some people work all day, or like me, have medication that keeps me focused, don't eat lunch. And so at the end of the day, my blood sugar is this low and people say hi and I'm like, where's an apple? Peanuts, and so super hangry, so it's like, what are we doing to make sure people feel like they belong in our businesses, in our organizations? Belonging is the key. And when we're inclusive, when we're thinking about who's missing, whose voice is missing, or we have a business idea, but we're not doing a focus group. We're not telling our story and asking people what is missing. My neighbor has a business around for people like me with ADHD. Her whole business is helping people who have an idea, and then she'll put the details in it. I was like, who would have thought of that? And she was like, hey, you got all these magazines, you want me to help you? She said, I'm distributing, I saw on Facebook that you have this magazine. I work for a magazine too, and I'm dropping these magazines off. Is it okay if I drop some of your magazines off too? I've had the ones here, because I didn't know people were that nice, because my husband is the person who talks to everybody in the neighborhood. I pull into the garage because I people so much. By the time I get home, I'm like, I'm calling at the corner. I'm like, hey, open up the garage, I'm on my way, because I don't want to talk anymore. But I realize now that the very thing that I needed was my neighbors. When my neighbor lost his son, I've been in the military. I was able to walk across the street and respond to his entire family. I didn't even know that military training was still in there like that. I was like, get the kids to the nearest relative, do this. No neighbors go inside the building. Was able to help him. And who knew he had this degree in IT. He's able to build websites. I didn't know that. I was just helping a neighbor, and now he had the skills to help me. And now we're like brothers and sisters. But other than that, I didn't think we had anything in common, but we did, so.
Can we do one more question? Mm-hmm. Do we have one more question? Anybody? Oh, right there.
Hi, I'm Shar. I own a brewery in the Valley, and I'm constantly looking for education. In the beginning, I was looking for it for employees and such, but I'm really small, and COVID made that even smaller. So it's mainly me behind the bar. And so I've kind of shifted that focus to the customers who come in. So when I hear people talk about like how we can provide inclusion for employees, I'm kind of switching that to customers. But unlike having employees, I don't choose who walks through the door every day, which is awesome. And I'm super lucky to have an amazing community of customers who do come in. My question to you, though, is when someone comes in with like a different, I don't want to say aura, but kind of like I've built a community in the tap room, right? And people come in and everyone typically welcomes them with open arms, and I love that. But sometimes there are people in there who kind of rub the entire community that's in there the wrong way. And aside from me just pointing at them and being like, no, like take that energy outside, what would you say is a good way to kind of how you were saying, like, view, like kind of open arm, welcome them, but also maybe redirect a little bit?
That's a good question. Well, one, I say be safe. If you're the only one behind the bar, are you leaving behind the bar? But two, asking them to tell their story. Hey, you know, you've come here a couple of times. Hey, what's your story? One drink on me. Come tell me your story. And hear it. Like, okay. Because some people, I believe that hurt people, heal people, heal people. Some people, I used to think like, oh, these people, they don't want to, they're not, because when I came to Spokane at first, it was like, when I say it was racial and ethnic diversity was not where I was looking for it. I could walk downtown from one end to the next and not see anybody that looks like me. And I was like, but I'm glad it happened because I was able to find friends regardless of what this looks like. And so, and it pushed me in a place of needing inclusion because I needed friends. I needed people to connect with. And so when I hear people's story that are different from mine, you know, it's like, wow, I end up finding the why. Like, oh, or sometimes people feel like other people don't want them there, so they don't think about the energy they emit. And so I used to think that, and I was at work, I was like, they don't want me to be a part of this. This is this narrative I'm giving. But I didn't realize that my energy was pushing people away from me instead of bringing them in. And then I was like, what am I doing? You know, and it's like I had to change my mindset. Is this true? Is this true? Or is this what I'm feeling? So facts are not feelings, and feelings can feel like facts, so always fact check. So I have to check my feelings, but that's what I would do. I would just ask, hey, what's your story? Tell me your story. And hear what it really is, and be like, when other people come and be like, hey, there's my friend such and such. They don't like a whole lot of people around them, so we're gonna respect their privacy over here, but I just want everybody to know that's my boy or that's my girl over there. And people are like, oh, you know, so you're creating this space for everyone. But yeah, there's some people who come in that have that, they're just down, but it's probably why they're coming to your place until they can feel back up, because they feel the energy in your space. You're welcome.
Awesome. Round of applause for Kitara for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me.
We'll do one more round of applause for Slab Visuals for doing the audio visual, Brew Peddler for the wonderful coffee. You did a better job telling that story than I did, and Startup Spokane for the space. So thanks to those folks for making this possible. And with that, I think we're good.